Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening for the second part of exploring options as your engine approaches TBO. We really appreciate your time, and this, as well as the rest of the items in this series, is brought to you by Social Flight, help of Continental Motors. Social Flight is the free web and mobile app that helps connect pilots with everything going on in general aviation. We're here to support all of you. Our mission is to get everyone flying more. Social Flight does that completely free to our users. We have over 20,000 aviation events, over 200,000 places you can walk to from an airport, and over 100 educational videos, all available inside of that. And we really do appreciate the fact that you use that, and we appreciate it if you would help spread the word, because it all supports general aviation. And so with that, I turn it over to Bill Ross. Bill Ross is the Director of Product Support and Continental Motor Services for Continental. We have a series that will be going on for the next couple of months that does include many topics having to do with engines. And I believe Bill covers both Continental and some things that apply also to Lycoming engines. We will be recording tonight's presentation, and it will be available tomorrow, through Social Flight. And you'll get a link to that in an email following this that will allow you to see it afterwards. If you have any questions along the way, please use the chat feature that I believe is in your lower left of your screen. Put your chat there. I am listed on there as Bill as well, and we will gather those, and Bill can address those questions as we get towards the end of the presentation. So that's it with it. Thank you again, everyone, so much. Thank you, Bill, and go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you so much to everyone out there that took time out of your evening to listen to me talk about engines this evening. I really appreciate that, and thank you, Jeff, for making Social Flight possible, creating it, your support of general aviation. I know a lot of my flying brethren and friends certainly use it, and it's always useful to find a good place or an excuse to go fly. And as we've stated before, the best thing about this is it's free. So thank you to Social Flight. Coming to you tonight from the factory located in Mobile, Alabama. Speaking tonight from within the factory. It's one of the great things, one of the highlights about my job is to speak and talk about engines, talk about life cycle costs, reducing life cycle costs of engines, and trying to help people maximize their use and get the most out of their aircraft and their engine, because I do understand the pitfalls of aircraft ownership. I own a couple of airplanes, and I know what it's like to have unnecessary and unscheduled maintenance. This is, as Jeff said, first in a series of webinars that we'll be doing over the next couple of months that are all geared toward that are all geared toward providing you, the owner, operator, pilot, with general knowledge of the aircraft engine, how it functions, care and feeding of it, what it needs for longevity, and certainly, if nothing else, pointing out those questions that we need to ask of our maintenance provider. The purpose tonight in the presentation is actually part two of exploring our options as our engines get to TBO or exceed TBO. We'll jump right in and we'll review just a couple of points from last week that I think are key. That is the definition of what an overhauled engine is, what a rebuilt engine is, and what a new engine is. So if you'll indulge me, for those of you who were here last week, I want to review, and those that are just joining us for the first time tonight, I want to make sure that we're all clear on what those three things mean. They're used interchangeably within our industry, and to the trained ear, it can mean, overhaul can mean one thing and rebuilt could mean another when in fact a lot of it is used in general terms. An overhauled engine is, to review, an overhauled engine is taking your engine from your airplane, removing it, sending it to an overhaul shop or sending it to an overhauler that disassembles the engine. He inspects everything dimensionally and then reassembles the engine to service limits using existing parts from the engine. He may use overhauled parts, he may use used parts. There could be PMA parts, which are not necessarily factory genuine parts or spec parts, but they're parts manufacturing approval parts as required. The key thing about an overhaul is that it is not zero time. It may be 0 since major overhaul, but the continued time on the engine continues to run. For example, if your TBO was 2,000 hours and you decided to overhaul the engine at 2,000 hours, your engine would be 0 since major overhaul, but 2,000 hours total time. That's very key when we're talking about that because it can affect the aircraft value. When we talk about factory rebuilt, which again, another slang, reman, rebuilt and reman are used synonymously within the industry, and the FAA only recognizes the term rebuilt. Reman is sort of a slang term that's been developed over time, but rebuilt is the accurate word. That's the one that the FAA recognizes, and the only people that can grant rebuilt status and zero-time status to a rebuild is the factory, whether it be Continental or Lycoming. A new engine serial number is provided at that time. The engines are produced to new fit tolerances. We went over some of that last week about the gold standard features in a Continental engine, how they're built to that balanced and blueprinted stage now. The good thing about a factory engine is you receive full core credit for the runnable core. As it comes in, if the crankshaft falls out, it's cracked, or it's out of dimensional tolerances, the crankcase is out of dimensional tolerances, and all of it has to be scrapped, you're not penalized as you are with an overhaul. When your engine goes to an overhaul shop and you're quoted a figure of, let's say, for example, just throw out a number of $25,000 for an overhaul, and then the crankshaft, we find that it's cracked and needs replacing, well, that's an upcharge, and then the crankcase needs to be replaced, and that's an upcharge, and pretty soon that $25,000 overhaul is now up in the $35,000 and $40,000 range. So we want to be very, very cautious and careful about that, and understand that our overhauled choice, when it goes to the overhauler, you're rolling the dice on whether or not the parts are going to be usable again, and whether or not they will meet service limits. The factory rebuilt meets all factory specifications. It comes with a factory warranty, and if you look at the Blue Book values, the aircraft values are usually 10 to 15% increased in aircraft value. The factory new is, again, a new serial number, new and zero time. It's all new parts. Full core credit, again, for the engine that comes in. The parts meet the factory specs, and then, again, the warranty is intact from the factory. Again, 15% in aircraft value is not uncommon for a factory rebuild or a factory new. Tonight, that's just a review of overhaul, rebuild, and new. Tonight, I want to talk about some of the hurdles that we face when we're making this decision. There's a financial element. Certainly at my house, there's a gatekeeper. I joke when I'm speaking at different forums and all that my wife has a warped sense of priorities, like our children's college tuition and things like that. She doesn't see the importance of the airplanes like I do. And I'm just kidding. I do value the education, and my daughter is currently enrolled at the University of Alabama. But we do have a financial decision to make. There's always going to be some associated items that we will want to replace when we are looking at repowering the airplane. When we change the engine, we're going to talk about some of those things. We'll talk about a little bit about performance upgrades. There are many options out there for many of the aircraft that you fly. There are many horsepower performance upgrades that are out there that can really maximize the use out of our airplanes. And then it is key in getting the right facility that will perform the installation on the engine. I'll talk a little bit tonight about how you could take the, there used to be these balanced and blueprinted shops that would treat an aircraft engine much like a Formula One engine with the balancing and all that stuff. And in reality, I think it was a waste of money. There's no horsepower gain. There's really no smoothness gain in an engine that's turning 26, 27, 2800 RPM. It would be if it was turning at a higher RPM, maybe 10, 15,000 RPM. But the smoothness of the engine, believe it or not, folks, is going to be in how well that engine is installed into the airframe. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll give you some examples tonight. Hurdles faced. This is a picture that many of us may go through. You notice my friend there in the cartoon is wearing an Alabama shirt, so I'll shout out a Roll Tide to all of the Alabama fans out there. But this is something that often comes about, and it could be the wife can be the pilot, and the husband can be on the other side of the engine. But this is a typical decision that has to be made. I tell the story a lot of times about we have a small farm here in Mobile, my family does, and I used to spend a lot of my time cutting grass and a pecan orchard and things like that, and I finally talked my wife into allowing me to buy a 17-foot wide mower, and I did it by telling her that the 17-foot mower would let me cut the pecan orchard so fast that it would allow me to have more time with her. Now you pick how you want to work on your spouse or significant other or whatever, but that is certainly a hurdle to get over. When we're in all seriousness, when we're talking about an aircraft engine, we're talking about peace of mind, and we're talking about safety and reliability of you and your family and your passengers, and trying to minimize liabilities and things like that. There is a peace of mind in knowing what is in your aircraft engine. Whether you go to a reputable overhauler or you go to the factory to get the engine. Now, I want to talk just a few minutes about replacement items, because we run into this all the time with customers who come in to Continental Motor Services located in Fairhope, Alabama. I mentioned that last week, and I'll talk about it a little more. But that's our service wing, or MRO, of Continental Motors, and we do many, many installs at that facility of factory engines. I think we're probably the best in the world when it comes to installing the factory engine. But it surprises me that there will be mechanics that will install new, rebuilt, or overhauled engines into airframes, and they will skimp on or forego changing engine mounts and hardware. And this is one of the things that's very, very key in the smoothness of the engine, is to have those items replaced. 9 times out of 10, when we in technical support get a vibration reported vibration in a engine, it is simply an isolation issue. The engine is not isolated from the airframe. Either the mounts are worn or there's something in contact that doesn't provide the proper vibration isolation. I'll tell you a quick story of a time when a customer purchased a platinum engine. At the time, Continental was building platinum engines, and it was, we talked about that a little bit last week, that Continental learned from the platinum engine, and now we build our engines to that specification. But at the time, it was a cut above the standard rebuilt or new engine. So the expectation is that it would be a much smoother engine than the standard engine. Had a customer that purchased one, and a mechanic installed that engine, and they reported a vibration that shook the instrument panel. It buzzed in the seats, it buzzed in the rudder pedals, and to fly the airplane, one would think that the engine was coming apart. I was dispatched to that as a young tech rep at the time, and flew the airplane with the customer to do a look, listen, and feel. It became very evident to me that this was an isolation issue, just based on past experience that I've had with this. I opened up the cowling, did a cursory inspection of the engine, quickly saw a induction clamp, just a simple clamp that was, the tail of the clamp was in contact with the engine mount. And I asked the mechanic who was there for a slotted screwdriver. I loosened the clamp, adjusted it off of the mount, retightened it, and the owner went and we flew again, and he told me that was the smoothest engine that he'd ever been behind ever. So we went from perceiving that there was an internal problem with the engine in torsional vibration to something that was very, very benign, which is just simply isolation. Folks, I can't stress the importance of taking care of these items when you repower your airplane with a overhaul, rebuilt, or new engine. It's important that you do that. Engine mounts are not that expensive, and certainly one would want to do that. There are, for those that perhaps fly the Cirrus aircraft, some of the earlier aircraft, they have now an option for a 6-point engine mount, and that enhances the smoothness of the aircraft and engine combination as well. We also want to look at the hoses. Again, we install an engine that's a large investment, and I see people that are using old hoses that are tattered, hoses that may be contaminated with dirt, debris, and metal, perhaps from wear. And I don't understand why people do that, but they do. Again, a good installation will also include a new gamut of hoses, or at least a flushing and inspection of those hoses, and look at their age. Another thing that's key is an exhaust system. Many times these exhaust systems are the age of the airframe. A lot of engines that we produce here at Continental Motors do come with new exhaust systems, but many of them do not. That was specified from the manufacturer, from the aircraft manufacturer. Many of the Cessna products, they were outfitted with the exhaust system at Cessna. And that's something that one wants to look at very, very closely. In my short biography that I gave last week, I talked about working in engineering and analytical and accident investigation. And you'd be surprised at the number of problems that can arise out of a disrepaired exhaust system. I've seen countless leaks and cracks that can manifest themselves into other engine problems. For example, a turbocharged engine leaking exhaust can superheat induction air if it's near the induction system, and can raise the induction air temperature to a point where we could experience detonation, and that certainly will ruin your day. So we don't want to skimp on those things either. So we want to look at those items. If you've spec'd an engine, you've purchased an engine that comes with an exhaust system, fine. If it does not, you certainly want to have that exhaust system overhauled or inspected or replaced. Again, it's not that big of an investment, and it certainly can go a long way in providing good life out of the engine. So make sure that your maintenance provider is considering that when we're looking at the engine change. Also, when the engine is replaced, and I'm speaking for constant speed propellers, those propellers that we can change and vary the pitch on, it's important that those propellers, if they've not been serviced recently, that those be overhauled, flushed, and cleaned at the time. Particularly if, let's say that we've got an engine that's way up in age, it's past TBO, we're starting to see some metal levels in the filter that are starting to rise. It is very important that propeller and governor be sent off and flushed and overhauled, because those items can be contaminated with that metal and the metal that's being displaced within the engine. So never skimp on that. If your engine and filter are clean and you just a couple of 100 hours ago had an overhaul of the propeller and governor, that's fine. But if you've had any increasing metal in both an oil analysis or on looking at a filter or screen, it would be very prudent to go ahead and send that prop off to have it at least flushed, if not overhauled. And the same thing with the propeller governor. Again, these items can become contaminated, and then here we go and we invest in a new engine or a rebuilt or overhaul, and we put the dirty governor and the dirty propeller on, and now we've contaminated the engine with material that could lead to hard particle passage and accelerated bearing wear right out of the gate. And we don't want to do that. We certainly want to minimize that. So don't skimp on those items as well. Also, at Continental Motor Services in Fairhope, a lot of times when we do an engine change for those older airplanes that are not equipped with glass cockpits and multifunction displays, and a lot of times we'll put in an engine monitor. Engine monitors are good as a diagnostic tool, is an engine management tool, and many of our customers do that both at Continental Motor Services Fairhope and Mobile at our avionics shop over there that we spoke about last week. We do a lot of these in concert with an engine change, and it makes a lot of sense to again manage that new engine that we've repowered the airplane with. Also, there's horsepower upgrades. There are many supplementary type certificates out there for horsepower upgrades. There's a lot of work involved in doing that. Supplementary type certificates used to, when I started my aviation career, were pretty easy to do. Now there's a lot of engineering and testing and items that one has to demonstrate to the FAA before you're granted a supplementary type certificate, but there's many out there for many different airplanes that can enhance the performance of that. Western Skyways, Texas Skyways is one of our customers. They take an IO550N and put it in a 182. So they've got 310 horsepower in a 182. You can imagine the performance that you see out of that. Many of the V-tail Bonanzas and early model Bonanzas can be equipped with a 550B, and the performance and and operation of those aircraft are really incredible. So that's something to consider as well when we're going to repower and we're going to make this investment, that, are we really getting out of the engine or out of the aircraft what we desire? A lot of airplanes that you fly are great right out of the bag. A 182 with an 0470 is a good airplane. The V-tail Bonanza with the E-Series engine in the 470s, great airplanes. But you may want to consider some of these performance upgrades. Also, standby alternators and standby instrument air are another feature that people can do when they're repowering the airplane. Standby alternator is a good example. A lot of the aged airplanes that we see that come to Continental Motor Services are sometimes they will do a updated avionics panel. They'll put a glass panel in an old V-tail Bonanza with a engine change. And so there's more electronics than in the airplane now than there was when it was first manufactured. And so a standby alternator is a good feature as well. And standby instrument air is another feature that, depending on the model and all, that you may want to consider at the time that you're doing the repower. Proper installation of the aircraft engine. I can't stress enough how important this is. Last week I talked about this, and if I've heard it once, folks, I've heard it 1,000 times. Well, the guy that's putting in the gal that's putting in my engine in my Bonanza worked for the airlines for 34 years. Well, that's impressive, and I applaud that service to the airline, but that's not a Continental engine in a Bonanza that he's working on. In fact, a lot of the airlines, the mechanics are very specialized. So you may have a mechanic that specialization was DC-9 landing gears, and then he's going to be putting your engine in your airframe. Be careful about that. There's some questions that you want to ask as to his qualifications. How many times have you put in an engine? How experienced are you? How experienced are you in the troubleshooting? One of the things that we do at Continental Motor Services is we get the airplane when it's delivered to us. We always do a look, listen, and feel flight, and we record a lot of data on that flight. We look at cylinder head temperatures, we look at fuel flows, we look at aircraft speed and rigging of cowl flaps, and the list goes on and on. We take many pictures of the installation. We often find items that are out of specification or that are routed incorrectly, or not routed neatly, or routed in such a way that will transmit torsional vibration into the airframe. Now, that's a nuisance for us and our passengers to hear that and feel that vibration, but it's also taxing on the airframe for it to go through life with those added torsionals. We look for mechanical damage within the airframe, inspect the engine bay, the engine mounts, the steel engine mounts, look for corrosion, and items like that is very, very important. We can have the engine off. Most mechanics that are have done this before and have put many of these engines in, for example, in Bonanzas and most of the airplanes that are powered by Continental engines. You're looking at about 25 to 40 hours of labor to remove and replace the engine. We build it up as a complete assembly with the baffles and everything ready to go even before the owner gets to our facility. If the owner wants a repower, he can call us. We order the engine. We get it from the factory. We take it to Continental Motor Services. We build the engine up and get it ready so that when the airplane arrives, we take the engine out as a complete assembly after the flight and after the pictures. We send the Propeller Governor to our facility to have it overhauled, and then we go ahead and remove the engine and reinstall the engine as a plug-and-play package. And we do it as a complete assembly. Very important that you have somebody that's very, very competent and that has done that before. Here is an example of one that we did at Continental Motor Services. This is a unique example here. This is a A36 Bonanza with a 550B installed in it. And the owner came in with we'll say a tired engine. The engine was certainly nearing TBO, and he was complaining of a high cylinder head temperature on number 5. And when we got the airplane, it was a very nice Bonanza. We looked at the airplane. There was a lot of things in what we would classify as a state of disrepair with the baffle condition. And the squawk is that, hey, we've got high cylinder head temperature on number 5, and the owner was thinking that this was correlated to somehow the engine time. This was getting worse over time, and the cylinder head temperature was coming up. But in the first example here, we noted that the baffle seal was not conforming to the upper cowling. When you look at that engine, the way that airflow comes in over the top of the engine, that air is designed to come in through the top of the engine and down through those cylinders, between the cylinders. So that area that you see, the baffle seal not conforming to the upper cowling, that's a seal, and that seal is very, very important to trap that air, trap that what we call the delta P, that pressure area in the top, and force that air down through the cylinders for adequate cooling. Because he didn't have the baffle seal conforming to the upper cowling, there was an escape of that high pressure air into the back. Now, it was helping to keep the battery box very cool, but that's not really what we're worried about. We're worried about the cylinders. There were some other things that we noted, that there were cracks in the metal baffles. That's another place where air can escape and rob the cylinders of cooling air. The baffle seal on the side was making minimal contact with that upper side cowling. When we dropped the cowling down, there was a gap in there. So again, we had more air escaping around the side. And if you look at cylinder number 5, that was the one that he really complained of as being high. The baffle seal was collapsed. It wasn't contacting the upper cowling, and there was a large escape of cooling air around cylinder number 5. That cylinder was running hotter than all. And the owner, because the engine was at TBO, and it had some oil leaks and some things like that, he could have flown a little longer, but again, peace of mind was important to him, and we installed a new 550 with a DeShannon baffle kit, and that's what it looks like when it's complete. And that's a nice, clean installation that he can be proud of for years and years to come. And he's protected that investment with the baffle condition and maintenance. I talked to so many people that they start to have cylinder head temperature problems, and you ask either the owner or the mechanic or the pilot, whoever, what's the condition of the baffling? And they say it's just great. There's no problem with the baffling. We go out there, we find those things that I just went over, those cracks and those minimal contacts. We've even gone out and found bird nests within the inner cylinder baffling, and mechanics are telling us that the baffling is just fine. Never skimp on that. Always protect that investment and make sure that that baffling is in good order. The Shannon makes a very nice baffle for those of you who have a Bonanza, and it makes a very, very, very clean installation. Also, when the engine is installed, and I'm speaking particularly for fuel-injected Continental engines, it's very important that the fuel system be set up in accordance with Service Information Directive 97-3 or the latest current revision of the Maintenance and Operator's Manual for that particular engine. You'd be surprised at the number of engines that never have this done. And mechanics always say to us here at the factory, those who don't know, well, didn't you set it up from the factory? Didn't you set the fuel system up from the factory? And there's a presentation that I do on fuel system calibration and the reasons for that. And I'm going to try to give you the Reader's Digest version or the short version of it. The fuel pump and the throttle body and the different components that make up the fuel injection system, when they're manufactured here at the factory, they're flowed on a test bench with Stoddard solvent, and they're flowed to reference a flow versus pressure curve to ensure that the engine will, that the component meets engineering criteria. That's it. So it's adjusted to be in the center of the goalpost, if you will, for that engineering criteria, just to show that the pump or the item does what it's designed to do. When that component is put on an engine, it has to be calibrated for that installation. If you receive a factory engine from Continental Motors, chances are it was outfitted with stacks in the test cell. All of our engines are tested 100%, but it may not have your exact exhaust system. It may not have, doesn't have your head pressure into the pump that you see in your airplane. And so because of those variables, the fuel system has to be calibrated. It is not rocket science. It's not calculus. It's very easy to do as long as your maintenance provider understands the system and how to adjust it. We certainly can assist with that if you've purchased or recently purchased, or if you're in the market for a Continental engine and you have a mechanic or maintenance provider. Let us work with him from a technical support point of view and make sure that he does these adjustments correctly. We put a large barber pole tag on the engine that says when you install the engine, you should set up in accordance with 97.3. A lot of mechanics discard that and throw it in the waste paper basket. Many of the problems that you see with fuel-injected engines, engine dies on rollout, engine stumbles, engine won't idle, are not necessarily a problem with a part or component that need replacing. I've seen many components changed in an attempt to troubleshoot when all it really needed was a quick adjustment or quarter turn adjustment on the low pressure or the high pressure on the fuel pump. So again, make sure that you've got a competent mechanic that is setting that fuel system up in accordance with our instructions. If you want to learn more about the fuel system setup, you can go to our website and you can go under support materials. You can go to bulletins and service bulletins, and you can type in a keyword, fuel injection, and you'll get the latest revision of Service Information Directive 97-3, and it explains in great detail why the system has to be adjusted, at what intervals, because it does need to be done every year, at least at each annual, and it tells you the tools and all that your mechanic will need in order to accomplish that. It's very important. It's probably the single most often overlooked item of maintenance in a fuel-injected Continental engine. And if you ask me what's the most important item of maintenance, clearly I'm going to say fuel injection setup and adjustment, at least at annual. A lot of times I'll speak at a seminar and there may be 100 people in the room, and I'll ask the question, who flies a fuel-injected Continental engine? Raise your hand. And 90%, 95% of the people will raise their hand. Next question I ask is, if you fly a fuel-injected Continental engine and you are 100% sure that your mechanic that your maintenance provider, at least at each annual, is checking your system pressure with calibrated gauges and adjusting it accordingly. Raise your hand. And no kidding, folks, I may have 5 people in the room of 100 that raise their hand and know that. That's a key thing, not only with a new engine or a repower of an airplane, but it is key for the longevity of your engine that you have now. Make sure that your maintenance provider is doing that. Again, if you have questions about that, you can reach us at the toll-free number on the website for technical product support, and we can work with your mechanic. If your mechanic says, "Oh, you don't have to do that. Continental's crazy. They set it up at the factory. You don't need to do that." You need to get another mechanic. Or, again, if I've mentioned this before, if he's your brother-in-law and in the interest of family harmony, you want to keep him around and have him do the work on the airplane, get us in touch with him, us at Continental, and we'll get him to our week-long advanced technical training class here at the factory, and we will train him on how to do that. And that invitation goes out to you as owners and pilots too. A lot of times we bring the owners and pilots bring their mechanic and they sit in on the class with the mechanic. While it's tailored to be an advanced technical training class for maintenance providers, our owners get a lot out of the class, and we invite you to come and do that. It's a week-long class. You get a factory tour, and you get the best in Southern hospitality and Southern cooking and the whole bit. So we encourage you to go to our website, look at those schedules, and come down there. Proper propeller balance is another key item. Those propellers that we do at the prop shop are statically balanced, but we do a dynamic balance once we install the install the engine at Continental Motor Services. We do that without question on every installation. Also, during the life of the engine, don't neglect oil changes. That is very, very important that you do the oil changes, that you look at the filter, look at the constituents within the filter, the screen, whichever you have. Always have make sure that your maintenance provider is cutting the filter and examining that. Even if you're on oil analysis, make sure that filter is being cut and that those pleats are being inspected for changes. That's what we're looking for, is changes. It's not uncommon to find a little metal in these engines. It's uncommon to find part numbers. You start seeing part numbers, it's probably time for some unscheduled maintenance. But in reality, what we're looking for is a relative change over time, both in the oil analysis and in the filter. Fuel system adjustment, I think I beat that dead horse to death. Very important. Baffle condition, I did that too. Air filter is another item that's skimped on and overlooked. On the oil analysis and on the visual inspection of the filter, if I wash the constituents of the filter into a clean Petri dish and look at it under magnification, I can see the functioning, how well the air filter is functioning, or the induction system as a whole. If I start to see raised levels of silicon, I need to look at either the filter. Is the filter torn? Is the filter not fitting properly? Is the alternate air door rigged correctly? Is there a crack in the induction system? So there's a lot of things that we can change, or that we can look at. Also, the filter, there are upgrades. There's the K&N, there's the Challenger, there's Bracket. There's a lot of filter manufacturers out there that produce a lot of good products, aftermarket products that can enhance the life longevity of the engine through a better filtering system than they were originally provided. And then correct lubricants and care and feeding, if you will. That can be found again at our website. What oil do I put in this engine? can be found in Service Information Letter 99-1. That's, again, you can go to Service Bulletins at our website, keyword oil or lubricants, and we publish a document on what's the proper oil to use, and the also preservation of the engine if you're going to be dormant for 6 months or so. We have some preservation techniques that you want to follow. Last week I talked about the not using an aircraft engine and it sitting is probably more detrimental than anything to an aircraft engine. I hear a lot of times people talking about, I've got a factory rebuilt engine that only has 500 hours on it, so I'm a long ways from TBO. But what they leave out is that the factory rebuilt engine was done in 1966. That can be problematic from a corrosion point of view, especially if the engine's not preserved like it should be. All those documents can be found at our website, and I do invite you folks to go to our website. It's a vast amount of information, just about anything that you can think of. We've got service instructions on. And then the proper break-in of the new engine. We talked about this in one of the questions that we had from one of our attendees last week, and I'll review break-in again. Factory engines and overhauled Lycoming engines and overhauled Continental engines from Continental Motor Services are not broken in totally. The incipient break-in has started. All of our engines are run for an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending upon the schedule of the engine model and what the computer has to go through for that particular engine model. But the break-in has not yet occurred. So for all of our engines, we recommend 25 hours of straight weight mineral oil, and we recommend once the engine is installed, we do this at Continental Motor Services, all the engines we install, we break in for the owner. We can do it with the owner in the airplane, or we can do it without, but we break that engine in for the owner. We go up, apply full power, make a full power takeoff, shallow climb, set power at a 75% power range at a best power or richer mixture for the first hour, and we fly for an hour. We come back, we look, we do an inspection of the engine, look for leaks, look for anything that may be problematic, give the engine a clean bill of health. We go out for the second hour and do the same thing. The only difference is we vary the power from between 65 and 75% for the second hour at a best power or richer mixture. And again, the reason we want the best power mixture is we want and we desire high combustion pressure during the break-in. I know that there are proponents out there of breaking engines in lean of peak. It is not something that Continental recommends. In fact, we've seen a lot of people that do that often find themselves with slick cylinders. What I mean by slick cylinders is the hone pattern, the little scratch pattern that we put in for oil retention in the cylinder forms an oil oxide coating in those valleys, and the ring starts to work like a squeegee, just pumping oil back and forth. And typically when that happens, the only way to get that corrected is to remove the cylinders and re-hone them. And that's usually happens when people are running a mid to high RPM, 2,500 to 2,600 RPM, something like that, and a low manifold pressure. You know, in a sense, they're trying to baby the engine. We want and desire good combustion pressure to squeeze the rings against the cylinder walls. Our piston rings have a semi-keystone design, So the combustion pressure actually pushes them out and against the cylinder wall, and that starts the incipient wear. After the 2-hour mark, you can go back to your normal way of flying the airplane. We just ask that you don't do any air work, slow flight, or any of that type of thing. And again, continue the mineral oil for the 25 hours. And the oil consumption should stabilize in about the 3rd or 4th hour. It'll be using a little oil, and then all of a sudden it stops, and that's when our engine is considered to be broken in. Again, SIL 99-1 is a good document to look at if your airplane is going to be sedentary for a while. Look at that document and use that for lubricants and sealants, and also the document on preservation. It's very, very important. That can also be determined by how humid it is. If any of you have been watching the weather here in Mobile, Alabama, over the last few days, we have really had some rain. It's been extremely humid here. I categorize it as absolute humidity. We had a little relief today, but we're in store for a 100% chance of rain for the next 3 or 4 days. Very humid climate, and that can lead to corrosive attack for engines that sit for a long period of time. Also, as we start to conclude, I talked last week about this. For those of you that are contemplating an engine change, if you'll call us at Continental Motor Services, we have a lot of parts in stock. We sell a lot of items, and right now we're offering a 5% discount on those peripheral things that I talked about when you're installing your engine. And just to name a few would be examples like engine mounts, exhaust, hose kits, standby alternator, vacuum pumps, engine monitors, hose kits, and things like that. The number there for Continental Motor Services is listed. Option 2 is the parts department. You mentioned the webinar and that you sat through listening to me preach for an hour, and they'll give you a discount on those items for the engine that your mechanic or your maintenance provider is putting in. Again, real quick, we'll talk just about a little bit about our product support. There's 45 team members within the product support department in Continental Motor Services. The people you talk to, a lot of them are airframe and power plant technicians. They have their own airplanes. They're licensed pilots, and they're very professional in what they do. And we've got representation all over the world. We, in Fairhope, we can do a lot of the things that I talked about tonight. STC conversions, those engine changes. Something I didn't mention is we'll come and get your airplane, we'll take it to Fairhope, we'll install the new engine, deliver it back to you, and fly with you upon arrival with the airplane, and do all that with you and show you about engine management and things like that. It's a good service. A lot of customers do take us up on that. If you're a Lycoming customer, we do Continental and Lycoming overhauled engines. We do lightning strikes, prop strikes, inspection and repair, STC conversions. A lot of those things you folks have all heard of Matituck. We closed Matituck and reopened that in closed Matituck, New York, and reopened it as Continental Motor Services in Fairhope. Cylinder repair, one-day turnaround on cylinder repair, a state-of-the-art cylinder repair facility. We now have avionics services, bench repair, retrofits, all of that. Factory direct engine sales. If you're needing an engine, please call us at the number there at 877-777-1870, or send us an email at sales@continentalmotors.aero. Whatever your aircraft is and whatever power plant you have, chances are we can certainly help with it. And then we're your in-stock source for Continental parts and airframe parts. Again, you're going to be talking to knowledgeable support staff for ignition systems, cylinders, parts, airframe parts, brakes, tires, and consumables. Give us a shot and let us help you with anything you or your mechanic may need. There's our website, technical support. If you've had recently or going through an engine change and want some assistance to your mechanic, or you think your mechanic may need some assistance, please have him call us or get us in touch with him there at the product support line. If you're about to repower your airplane, again, give us a shout. Let us be part of that so that we can maximize that experience and you get the most out of the engine and the longevity of the engine. And again, engine and part sales is listed there. And the website is a tremendous amount of information, and I invite you to certainly go there. Next time that we have this webinar will be April 29th, and it'll be another Wednesday night. And we'll be talking about choosing a maintenance provider that is competent. And I'll be showing a lot of examples, pictures of things and what I call atrocities within the industry for non-competent mechanics that were thought of as being the best in the industry. So you won't want to miss that. Look forward to that. We have a couple of more coming up. Compression testing, fact or fiction, on the 13th of May. Engine flight management, which we'll talk about Lena Peak in great detail. I'll also demonstrate a Lena Peak simulator at that time. That's on May 27th and June 3rd. That's going to be in a two-part series. Again, that concludes my presentation for tonight. I thank you all for attending. Again, it's the highlight of my career to be able to talk and assist people with their engines. And Jeff, at this time, I'll be glad to take questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Bill. I appreciate it, and thanks everybody for hanging with us. We have a few questions, Bill, and one of the ones, well, two of them really have to do with cylinders. And I was wondering if we could talk about that for just a moment. A couple of things. One having to do with, that there's obviously a very large AD coming out, and that could have some implications and put a lot of people in the market for cylinders. Can you talk a little bit about Continental Cylinders and things like, when you compare things, especially with, nitriding versus Cerminil or nickel coating and things like that, because that obviously cylinders play a big role in overhauls.
Certainly, good, Jeff. Be glad to address that. When you're talking about the cylinders, one of the things, and yes, we're all aware of the pending AD on the other manufacturer, the PMA manufacturer of cylinders. That has to do with the abutment joint and the head potentially coming off during operation. With Continental and cylinders, we don't reuse cylinders on our rebuilt engines, our new engines. All those parts are new. We don't reuse cylinders. We don't rebarrel cylinders at all. In fact, when an engine comes in as a core, those items are crushed and are scrapped. Every piece of the cylinder is scrapped. Nothing is reclaimed off of the cylinder. And so that's an important part of, I think, the puzzle. And of course, I'll say nothing good about Continental Cylinders because I work at Continental. I believe we build a very robust cylinder. There are some features that you talked about, nickel and chrome cylinders, that can add some features, and typically those are suited for people that don't fly very often. Our cylinders are steel barrels. They're nitride. They go through a nitride process for hardening, and they're very, very hard, and they're very resistant to wear. And if they sit for long periods of time, they can accumulate a little rust etching. A lot of times that is started, it's consumed within the oil. Those little iron oxide particles are entrapped within the filter, and it never, it's very benign, and there's no harm done. There are people that have the nickel and chrome cylinders that swear by that provides corrosion protection for those times for which there's inactivity. Continental has studied that for years, and in our position, we believe that the risks involved in those processes outweigh the benefit, and so we've not ever pushed for a nickel or chrome cylinder. And I know there's a lot of mechanics out there, and a lot of people are saying, well, I had a cylinder and the mechanic told me it was worn beyond limits, and there's a lot of things that can affect that. One of the few things being rust in the cylinders, but oftentimes those items and those cylinders are not measured in accordance with our instructions and how we do it here. And when you really look at those cylinders that are reported to be out of spec, you get them in here, you find that they're well within service limits, and sometimes they're well within new limits. So, I touched around that. I hope I answered the question. I can certainly dive in more specific, Jeff, but that's kind of an overview of our take on cylinders.
Okay, so that kind of covers one of the other questions as well, which had to do with reusing cylinders and the practice as well as of oversizing or reboring cylinders to be able to reuse them. Any comments on that before we move on?
Yeah, we do have a cylinder repair facility at Continental Motor Services, and those cylinders that we repair are usually below TBO. We don't cylinders that have been on for many years. We oftentimes just will exchange that cylinder, but we can and do, and there are shops that do, and we can at Continental Motor Services, not the factory. Everything coming out of the factory is new, but we can punch cylinders over. Let's say that there's some out of roundness in the barrel. We, with our Sun and SB10 hone, we can actually make that cylinder round again. We may have to take it 10 or 15 thousandths oversized, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's perfectly safe to do. The only caveat to that would be that the opposing bay be bored to the same size, so that the opposing bays are matched in balance. And that's the only caution that I would have. But if we get a cylinder that's got head dates of 1960 and 70 and stuff like that, a lot of times we'll just exchange that for the customer and destroy that and get it out of the field.
Definitely interesting. I hadn't heard before the concept of if you oversize one, then what's across from it needs to be oversized.
Yeah, and that has to do with balance. There's very little combustion difference as far as one cylinder pushing harder than the other. A lot of people think that that's the reason. That's not really. I guess you could measure that, but it would be an infinitesimal amount, 0.00000 whatever. But the real difference is the opposing bay balance to be within 2 grams of each other.
Okay, we have one other question of the evening, and it has to do with repowering via an STC, having to do with a Mooney and seeing how that particular STC moves the engine as the engine change happens from 2500 to 2700. And the question being, well, what are your thoughts on, does that affect the longevity of the engine?
Yes, I'm very familiar with that STC and that power upgrade. It will not affect the longevity of the engine at all. The IO550G, which is the engine model in question, and I'm gonna try to make a long story short, but oftentimes I make short stories long. But it's a good question, and it needs to be answered in detail. When we build an engine model, and in this case for Mooney we built the IO550G, we build that tailored to what Mooney's specifications are for horsepower and for weight and for alternator and fuel system and the placement of fittings and hoses and things like that. So we build a model. IO550G is the model of the engine, and then we build the spec, and in that case it's usually the 6B. So it's an IO550-6B that tells us the amperage of the alternator, tells us how to orient the fuel system fittings and things like that. It's a custom-made engine. And Mooney wanted a specific amount of horsepower. There are engineers that took the airplane and said, hey, we can safely up the horsepower on the engine, get more performance out of the airplane, and do so safely. You can do that because the IO550G is the same base engine as the IO550N and those engines that are developing 310 horsepower. They're turning a little faster, and it's nothing, you will not hurt the engine at all by turning it a little harder. It is designed to run at those RPMs continuously without any problems. So you should have no heartburn in doing that conversion. It's a great conversion. It gives a lot of performance enhancement for the Mooney airplane, and you should have no worries at all in doing so.
Well, that's good to hear, especially speaking to someone that flies behind an IO550B and sometimes use the throttle more as an on-off switch than an actual control that can go somewhere in the middle. So I definitely appreciate hearing that. Anyway, we are out of time and actually a little bit over. I would just like to thank Bill very much for joining us. Thank you, Bill, and thanks everyone for taking the time this evening to join us. Again, the recording will be available tomorrow via Social Flight. You'll get an email after this presentation that will give you that information. And we do ask you again to help us spread the word. We are here solely to promote general aviation, get more people flying, and get the people flying more. And so with that, thank you very much for your evening, and thanks very much, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.